Alright friends, well this week there are 5 videos, but it is going to be different. You don't need to pick your favorite video or most clear video. The videos are all very different. I have one video about the humanity of Jesus, one video about the title of Messiah, and then I have 3 videos about Jesus and Islam. And all of this is about the topic of who is Jesus. And so this week, watch the videos, decide to write about maybe something that you learned or something that you liked. But you don't need to know which video it is or which one is better. You don't need to compare the videos. But let's focus on what you learned and what you liked today. And if you want a challenge, find something you don't like or disagree with. Okay? Blessings, brothers and sisters. Hopefully this blesses you.
How was Jesus divine is a less popular question because of its vast and obvious evidences, such as Christ's way of birth, resurrection, or the fact alone that he is a king and is a son of God. How is Jesus human is a question that's a little more intriguing because it does seem hard at first to believe that Christ, who has died and then lived again for our sake, was and is just like us. This is where we explain Jesus' humanity in 4 aspects: his human body, human emotions, human mind, and human will. Even when he was divine, Christ had a body like ours. He was born through Mary, grew through age, got tired, thirsted for water, hungered, was vulnerable to pain, needed rest in his journeys, and faced death. Christ's body had the same limitations just as ours. This reflects God's humility and our chance to do good even in pain, just like Christ. On the brink of certain events, we cried to release our feelings. Jesus had done this too. He had cried before entering the city of Jerusalem, after his friend's death, and even in between his prayers. Jesus had also been angry. We may feel uncomfortable with that fact, but anger as an emotion is not wrong or sinful. It is what we do with anger that could be sinful. In the scriptures, Jesus had called Peter Satan for attempting to deflect him from his mission. Jesus had also driven out vendors and money changers from the temple. The difference with how Jesus handled his anger is that he got angry when he met a situation of injustice. He directed his anger at the appropriate person, not others, and never treated any person violently. Jesus had also felt fear, mostly because fear is a natural reaction to something frightening. The books of Matthew and John tells us about the agony in Gethsemane, where Jesus had feared of what was about to come, but he prayed to overcome this. Specifically, he admitted the fear, he put the matter in God's hands, and replaced the fear with courage. Our emotions are not to be suppressed since they have an essential place in our humanness and therefore in our Christian discipleship. Just as Jesus had been emotional in certain situations, we too should learn never to suppress our own and be able to channel it in the best way possible, just as Christ had. Even through his divinity, Christ also shares a human mind. 2 key texts make this undeniable. In the book of Luke, where Jesus increased in wisdom, and in Mark, where even he, as a divine person, didn't know when his second coming will be, because Christ is fully divine and fully human. He has both an infinite divine mind and a finite human mind. He can be said not to know things because he is human, and human minds do not know everything. At the same time, Jesus can be said to know all things because he is divine. Paradoxical as it is, we must affirm that Jesus both knows all things and doesn't know all things. For the unique two-natured person of Christ, this is no contradiction, but a peculiar glory of the God-man. The scripture has also shown us Christ's human will, which submits to the divine will, just as we Christians are expected to do so. In the book of John and in the book of Matthew. The humanity of Jesus plays a great significance in his mission, because it is through Christ's humanity that we are able to better understand and accept God's Word.
There's this crazy story at the beginning of the Bible. We have Adam and Eve, and they're in the Garden of Eden.
And everything in this garden is great. It's exactly as it should be, except there's this one tree that they're told by God not to eat from because it's dangerous and it will kill them.
So that's it. Avoid this fruit tree and we're fine.
Right, it seems pretty simple. But in this garden, there's a snake, and it starts telling a different story. It says that if you eat of this tree, it's not going to kill you. In fact, it's going to make you become like God.
And Adam and Eve, they believe the snake and they eat the fruit.
And because of this, the goodness of the garden is tragically lost, and evil and death enters into God's good world.
Now, why is there a talking snake in the garden? I mean, this thing is a problem.
Yeah, it's very strange. And even more strange is the fact that the Bible doesn't say why or how this thing even got there. It just presents the snake as this creature who's in rebellion against God and that wants to get other people to doubt God's goodness and lead them on a path towards death. And so whatever this snake is, it's the source of evil that pervades our world and our lives, even still today.
But there is some hope, because right here in the story, God makes this really interesting promise to Adam and Eve.
That someone is going to come in the future, a son of Eve. And this guy's going to come and he's going to crush the serpent's head and destroy evil at its source. However, during this battle, the serpent is going to bite this guy's heel.
So it's like a mutual destruction.
Yeah, it's this very strange but beautiful promise. And it's just left hanging there until the next key moment in the story, when God singles out this guy named Abraham and says that through his family, goodness and blessing is going to be restored back to all of the nations of the world. And as we follow this family, we get to one of Abraham's great-grandsons, this guy named Judah. And he receives this promise that a king is going to come from his line and that the whole world's going to follow this king, and he's going to bring peace and harmony, and there'll be lots of food and wine and milk and vineyards, and it's going to be awesome.
The first king that we meet from the line of Judah is a guy named King David. And he's a hero. Maybe he is the snake crusher.
But it turns out that David is infected with the same evil as the rest of humanity. He never crushes the snake, just the opposite. However, God makes a promise to David that this king is going to eventually come from his line. But as you go on in the story, one by one, each generation of his sons, they're just total chumps. They give into the snake, they choose evil, they go after money and sex and power and following other gods.
Things get so bad that they run the nation of Israel right into the ground, and the big bad empire of Babylon just takes them out.
And so now there are no more kings to even fulfill this promise.
So it seems like the whole plan is lost.
But during these dark days, there's this crazy group of guys called prophets, and they just kept talking about this coming king and reminding us of the promise that he'll come, he'll defeat evil, he'll restore the garden. Now, one specific prophet, Isaiah, he tells us more about why this king is bitten. Isaiah says that the promised king receives this wound because of humanity's evil, and that it kills him. But then all of a sudden he comes back, and Isaiah says it's because he suffered this wound that he can now become a source of healing to other people.
But the Old Testament ends, and the snake-crushing king that everyone's been talking about never shows up.
And this is why, when the New Testament begins, it introduces us to Jesus of Nazareth, not as some random guy, but as someone who comes to fulfill these specific ancient promises.
Yeah, we learn that he's from the line of David, Judah, and Abraham.
And he goes around Israel announcing that the goodness of God's kingdom is here, now. And he begins confronting the effects of evil on people by healing them, by forgiving them of their sins and evil.
Many people are now believing that this is, in fact, the promised king.
But Jesus began telling his closest followers that he was going to become king and bring peace by taking the full effect of humanity's evil into himself.
The fatal snakebite wound.
Exactly. And so it seems like the serpent wins. And this story actually would be a tragedy except for what happens next. Jesus rises from the dead.
And now Jesus has the power over evil and death for himself.
And so the rest of the New Testament is then making this claim that Jesus' power over evil and death has now become available to us to begin confronting the effects of evil in our lives.
But even still, death and evil are a real problem in our world all around us.
And so the story of the Bible ends by describing this future day when Jesus comes back and he finishes the job. He destroys the snake once and for all, and he restores the goodness of the garden here.
Hey guys, it's Nabil Qureshi. I get a lot of questions about Islam and Christianity, and I'm hoping to answer a few of the most common ones today. One of the most common questions I get is whether Allah and the God of Christianity are the same. It's an interesting question because we believe as monotheists that there is only one God. And so the one God who exists, who created all people, is listening to all people when they pray. He knows who they are by name. He designed them. And so when people pray, no matter to whom they're praying, there is one God who is listening. But is that one God the Islamic conception or the Christian conception? Now, here's the point that I want to make. The way Islam teaches God's character, his being, is very different from that of Christianity. Of course, the Christian God is triune. The Christian God is a father, an absolutely perfectly loving father. The Christian God is willing to enter into this world and suffer alongside his creation. The Christian God is willing to forgive us of all our sins by paying the penalty himself. In all of these ways, he is very different from the Muslim God. The Muslim God is transcendent, in fact, unknowable. Chapter 5 of the Quran says that he remains behind a veil, as if it were, and it's not meet for him to enter into this world or to be made known. So the Christian God and the Muslim God have very different characteristics. They do different things, and they offer different paths. The Christian God says, believe in him, follow him, and he will take our sins upon himself. The Muslim God gives us rules to follow and laws to complete in order for us to have a chance at earning his grace and mercy. These are two very different gods in the way they are taught, but thankfully, there is only one God. And so when a Muslim or a Christian cries out for God to reveal himself, God is gracious, and he answers, as he answered me.
Isn't Christianity, at its core, the same as other religions? If you could put it in a pot and boil it down, wouldn't the remainder smell, look, and taste the same as Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and the rest? What is religion? Just as we refer to our minds as being thoughts and ideas beyond the electrical impulses of our physical brain, the major religions propose that the human's true essence is their soul instead of their physical body. But just like our physical bodies, the soul also has needs, or it will starve. Each religion proposes to be a guidebook of that spiritual plane that helps lead our starving souls to soul bread. Aren't these guidebooks all the same? The historical Jesus of Nazareth told a story about a father, 2 sons, and a family business. It was custom that the sons would split the business when their father died. But the younger son said to his father, "I can't wait for you to die. Give me my money now." Seeing his son's true heart, the father gave it up to him. The son turned his back to his family and hit the road. Far away, he partied like an animal, eating and drinking and paying prostitutes, until suddenly his pockets were empty. In desperation, he found a job feeding pigs. But the country's economy crashed, and he couldn't even make enough to feed himself. Now broke and starving, he found himself craving the pig's slop, when it suddenly hit him that there was probably food back home. What do you think? Should this father let him back into the house? As long as the son works hard to pay his father back, then he should be able to get a place at the family table again, right? Let's see how Jesus ended this story. The son decided to return, admit his wrong, and ask his father for a minimum wage job. But still a ways from home, his father spotted him and ran out to him and wrapped him in a bear hug. Remorseful, the son began his plea. "Dad, you shouldn't even call me your son anymore." But the father put a fine robe on him and a ring with a family crest. He told his workers, "Get the best meat and prepare a welcome home feast, for this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found." Although Jesus told this as a story, he was actually presenting his view of the truth. In the story, the father represents God. So is Jesus seriously teaching that God forgives selfish gluttons before they've repaid their wrongs against him and others? Judaism teaches that one can atone for their wrongs by changing their behavior, praying, and doing good deeds. Islam says we can move towards paradise by performing the 5 pillars. Hinduism claims that if we store up enough good karma, we will reunite with Brahman. Buddhism says we can enlighten and discipline ourselves into nirvana by practicing the 8-fold path. But in this story, the father embraced his son and fed him before he did any work. Why? Because in Jesus' view, it's impossible for a person to repay God for their bad deeds. God is a perfect judge who cannot be bought off with anything that we have to offer. Jesus said that when we die, we will face God with all of our deeds laid out. None of us is completely morally perfect, and none of us will stand a chance of justifying ourselves. Then, is there hope for us? Jesus believed so, and staked his life on it. He claimed to be God in human form who came to pay our moral debt with his innocent life, so that if anyone truly believed and surrendered to him, they would receive a full pardon from God and the power to change how they live. Other religions teach that our own self-sacrifice can pay our debt, but Jesus taught that only God's own self-sacrifice can pay our debt. All other religious founders claim to be guides to lead our starving souls to bread. Jesus claimed to be the bread our souls starve for.